Thank God we brought an extra pair of clothes. It's tired.
I need to go resting spot. Let's take a little break here.
So we're almost there, and now we know that the Lord, baby Jesus, is coming. So I know what I'm going to say. How about you guys?
I know you.
I'll go. Okay. So I'm going to talk about Psalm 6, how David asked the Lord for mercy and for him to be saved, just like in the Old Testament, like when the exile was coming and the Lord warned Jerusalem, but it hit and they didn't know what to do, so they asked the Lord for mercy. Then I'll also talk about Psalm 11 when David was happy that the Lord was in his temple and he thanks him. Just like in the Old Testament when God unleashed the 10 plagues to Egypt to get the Israelites out of slavery, they freed the Israelites and that just got them out of slavery and they were so happy. Then also Psalm 24 when David says the earth is the Lord's and the Lord is the King of glory. That reminded me of in the Old Testament when the Egyptian army was after the Israelites and then he split the sea and let them go through, and that just showed how God can do whatever he wants in the world. What about you, Cole? What are you going to say?
Well, first I'm probably going to ask him for some water.
Yeah, me too.
You're a silly dude. Alright, but probably the first thing I'm going to add, well, first in Psalms 23, it talks about how God is always with us. He guides us, and we shall not be afraid because he will always protect us. This reminds me of the story of David and Goliath in the Old Testament because everybody was scared of the big giant Goliath, except for David, because he went to go battle him because he knew God would protect him. The second thing I'll probably talk about is Psalm 53. Psalm 53, it talks about if you say wicked things, if you like evil more than good, and God will punish you, and everyone will know you are sinful. And the last thing I'll probably tell him is Psalm 62. It talks about having trust and faith in God and never turning away from him like many people do.
Yeah.
This reminds me of the time in the Old Testament when the Israelites thought Noah was crazy for believing in God and built a giant ark because God said he was going to flood the earth. But it turns out Noah was right. And you guys thought I was going to leave out my explanation for Psalm 53. In Psalm 53, again, it talks about that God will punish you if you turn away from him. And this reminds me of the story of King Saul in the Old Testament, a man who turned away from God and did wicked things. God then told him he was unworthy to be king. Timmy, what are you going to tell him, Timbo?
I'll probably say a lot. I'll probably like top three. The top three is probably about Proverbs chapter 4 because the overall concept of that chapter was that you need to listen to your father because he is wise and has wisdom and tell you what to do. This reminds me of the Old Testament when Jeremiah and God and how God told Jeremiah to preach about God to the temple of Jerusalem and the Jerusalem people, but they didn't listen, but Jeremiah still obeyed God. I'll talk about Proverbs chapter 7, which is about listen to God and not fall into temptation. And this reminds me of Adam and Eve in the Old Testament because they fell into temptation and were tempted by the devil. I'll talk about Proverbs chapter 18. 18? That
That's
one
a good one.
is about how people who are lazy or a fool and disobey God. And while people who are wise and diligent will be rewarded by God.
Jesus Christ.
And this reminds me of how people of Jerusalem.
I don't like that kid.
And then the second exile, and how people who were faithful to God got to go back to Jerusalem and were God's remnants. Hey, Johnny boy, what do you think of this, dog?
I'm going to talk about chapter 2 of Proverbs because it talks about if you follow the way of the Lord and live your life with wisdom and not follow the ways of the wicked, you shall live a righteous life with God in heaven. This reminds me of the story of Noah's Ark, because he followed what God told him to do, and because he survived through the wicked weather and all of the temptations, he lived with God in heaven forever. Also, chapter 28, Proverbs, because it talks about if you worry more about money and what other people think, and you're a sinner, and you do not follow God, you will live in a bad, unholy life. If you follow the law of God, don't you try to be a good person.
Good person.
No, you're not perfect. You will be rewarded by God.
Yes.
This reminds me of Moses and how he gave away all his money and wealth to follow God and save the people from slavery, even though they went against God's rule and worship. He trusted God even though he thought God's ideas were ridiculous. Also, chapter 24, because it talks about staying humble and follow God's word, and when your enemy falls, stay humble. This reminds me of David and Goliath's story, because as soon as David killed Goliath, he wasn't cheering and mocking him.
Alright, I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited. Let's go
Yeah,
finish it
let's
out.
get
Let's
Going,
get
you
it.
might be late for
Let's
Jesus.
go
Please
see
find
baby
some
Jesus.
water.
Let's go,
Woo!
boys.
Let's go.
Timmy, John, this way, boys.